Okay.
The very first verse in the Bible says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Very first verse, okay? Like, how are we going to introduce this whole idea? That's how it starts. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, you can derive from that a few things. In the beginning, God means that when the heavens and the earth were created, God already existed, right? And then there's a couple other things in the scripture I want to point out to you. I just did this Google search during worship, and I was wondering, I wonder how many times it talks about this, because it does talk about this a lot. And so there were, I Googled the phrase heavens and the earth, or God created the heavens and the earth. So we got Genesis 1, I think there's about 25. Yeah, 25 verses came up from the Bible that contain the phrase, created the heavens and the earth. And so Genesis 1:1 we just read, Genesis 2:1, but then we go First Chronicles, 16. For all the gods of the peoples are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. And so here's this spot in the Bible where when we're talking about God creating, it says all those other gods that people worship, they're fake. Our God made everything. Okay? 2 Chronicles, blessed be the Lord God of Israel who made heaven and earth. And it just goes on from there. So this idea that God is the creator of everything is a very Jewish idea. It's been around since the first verse in the Jewish Bible called the Torah. Nehemiah, you alone are the Lord. You have made the heavens, the heaven of heavens with all their hosts, the earth and all that is on it, and the seas and all that is in them. And so to a person 5,000 years ago, you don't know anything about telescopes. All you know is there's the heavens, right? Like there's the heavens up there, and there's the earth right here, and then there's the sea over there. There's like kind of these three levels to everything, right? The top, the middle, and the bottom. And so God created all of it in Nehemiah. Now listen to this phrase. Job, still a very old book in the Old Testament. Who alone stretches out the heavens? So how did God create the heavens? There's this phrase, stretching out the heavens. Now listen to how many times, I'm going to zoom through here now. Psalms, I love this verse. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars which you have made. And Psalm 19:1, the heavens are telling the glory of God, and their expanse, stretched out, their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Psalm 33, by the word of the Lord the heavens were made, by the breath of his mouth. Do you guys know second verse, maybe third verse in the Bible? How did God's words, how are those involved in his creation? How did God create with words? He spoke. What? How did he create by speaking? It's in the first chapter. What's the first thing that he created?
Light.
Light. Let there be light. He speaks creation into existence out of nothing. Okay? There's nothing but God, and he speaks, and things are created. Here's Hebrews 11. This is the other verse from the Bible I was going to read to you. I mean, those are all Bible verses too. But Hebrews 11. By faith, this is 11:3 if you're curious. By faith, we understand that the worlds were framed or created or made. The worlds were framed by the Word of God. What do we usually call the Word of God? The Bible. Did this book make everything? Is that what's meant by the world? The worlds were framed by the words of God? No, Joanne. Wrong answer. Okay, what does it mean? How could his word make everything? He spoke everything into existence out of nothing. And if you read through the entire Bible and kind of look at these details, how did God create everything? There's this stretching out of the heavens, and there's this speaking into existence out of nothing. Let me just zoom through here. By the breath of his mouth, by the word of the Lord the heavens were made, by the breath of his mouth all their hosts. Another about him speaking. Psalm 33:9, he spoke and it was done. He commanded it and it stood fast. Okay, lots of good verses here. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. Isaiah 40:22. It is he who sits above the circle of the earth. Like, oh, the earth isn't like, some flat like thing. It's a circle. Like when we look at the moon in the sky, it's a circle, right? And so he says in Isaiah 40:22, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain, and who spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. Isaiah 42, this says the Lord God, who created the heavens and stretched them out. And it just keeps coming. Isaiah 45, I stretched out the heavens with my hands. Jeremiah 10, and by his understanding he has stretched out the heavens. I'm sure we can find a couple more. Jeremiah again, stretched out the heavens. So a couple of things that we see when we're just talking about the universe, like astronomy, that God spoke it into existence with the words of his mouth. It doesn't say that God made it out of other things. I read you that Hebrews verse. I kind of forgot to mention that. Let me read that Hebrews verse to you one more time. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed. The speaking part I got to you. So this is Hebrews 11 in the New Testament. By faith we understand the worlds were framed by the word of God. And then listen to this. So that the things which are seen, everything he made, was not made of things which are visible. So God could have, there's lots of creation stories out there from the past where the gods or the creator of some form, or it just happens and God's not involved, where this stuff got used to make this stuff. Even God does that with humans. What does God use to make humans? Today, humans come from humans. That's science. Very good. But the first humans, what does it say that he used?
Adam, I think, used water and dirt.
Water and dirt, minus the water. What do you call water or dirt without water? Dust. That we're made out of dust is what Now you don't have to take everything literally, but yeah, and then Eve got to be made out of bone and dust, or maybe just the bone, right? But God could have used other things to create. But what the Bible seems to suggest is that God spoke things into existence out of nothing. No other things were used to make those things. Now, this brings us to the big thing. This is what Christians have believed for thousands of years, right? And before Christians, Jews. Jews believe that God created everything de novo, out of nothing. And I don't have a pencil. Anybody? Ball me, boys, right? Okay, so like literally 1,000 years ago, I don't remember what this word kalam means, but literally 1,000 years ago, people didn't really do science. I think we talked about that in the last lesson. What people did was they sat around and talked, and they call that philosophy. And it's actually pretty useful. You can get a lot of logical things out of that. And one branch of philosophy called natural philosophy or natural theology came up with this really rock-solid argument called the Kalam cosmological argument. And you probably don't want to remember that, but it's like there's a guy on YouTube, he's got like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and he makes a t-shirt that just says the Kalam. So like out there in the world, there are other people who are really nerdy like me too, guys, and they think these things are interesting, and they make t-shirts about it, okay? So this is a really big deal. One of my like heroes of the faith in the 70s went to college as a Christian, went to college to get his PhD in philosophy in Germany, which was probably kind of like not Christian anymore at that point, and he did an entire PhD dissertation on the Kalam cosmological argument. And his name is William Lane Craig, and he's like one of the coolest nerdy science Christian guys out there, philosophers. And he wrote like a dissertation, which is like a 4-year research project to prove you deserve a PhD. And so he then, in 1979, wrote a book called The Kalam Cosmological Argument, kind of revived this thing from like the 1100s. And it's, I mean, when you're going to see this thing, you're going to be like, how would that take 4 years? But people called philosophers spend crazy amounts of time doing their philosophy and then defending their philosophical propositions to other philosophers. And so here, in a nutshell, is this guy's 4 years of defending and treating every action, every angle you could take on this. And it's become one of the most solid arguments for the existence of God that exists. And it's so simple that like you could probably teach it to a 5-year-old. You ready? Whatever begins to exist has a cause. That's proposition 1. This is like geometry when you do proofs. I don't know if they still do that in high school. Yeah. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The atheists don't usually argue with this. It's called the law of causation. It's like, yeah, everybody agrees. Okay? The universe began to exist. This is where all of the debate has existed for the last 100 years. And there's quite a bit of debate, but there's pretty much consensus on this now. And then, you guys can probably get there. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. A plus B equals B.
A plus B equals
I
C.
don't remember how that works. It's called logic and stuff. What's going to pop out right here?
Has a cause.
Therefore, the universe has a cause. This is such a rock-solid argument. Like, where's a crack? The only potential crack in this argument is premise 2. The universe began to exist. That could definitely not be true, theoretically, if you don't know anything. Is that true? I don't know. Maybe the universe has always existed. And that's where we get these people called atheists. Atheists believe that somehow, and it used to be, atheists used to believe somehow matter, the universe, always existed. But now atheists don't actually believe that. Instead, what atheists have to do is they have to believe in what's called exotic naturalism. So they know, as you're going to see, they know the universe sprung into existence. So what they have to say is, before the universe, there must have been other universes, which doesn't really solve the problem, because then you just get what's called an infinite regress, where you're not actually answering the question. So, before the universe, there was a universe that caused the universe. And that universe came from a universe. Now I get it. The universe comes from the universe that comes from the universe. That's called an infinite regress. That's not an answer. That doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like infinity, you know? So now, atheists have some ways to basically get around it, but is it William Lane Craig? No, you guys don't know who these people are. Stephen Meyer has coined this phrase, exotic naturalism. There's no reason to believe it's true. There's no evidence, physical evidence for it, but scientists now are going for things like multiverse. There must be multiple universes. Or what's called quantum cosmology, where there's these kind of like imaginary forces we don't understand when things are tiny, small, and somehow they just explode universes into existence. So for atheists, I'm going to write the word atheist here. You can tell this is my first draft. Okay, so for atheists, there's a beginning problem. Where did the natural come from? They keep going backwards, and so I was going to write the word atheist here, and then that was going to be the word, but then I kind of forgot, so it doesn't make total sense. Just flow with me here, okay? So for the atheist, you can get rid of it. This is what they believe. The atheist believes the natural thing has always existed, and they've had to change the natural thing. It used to be the universe has always existed, and now it's something before the universe that was natural existed. But Christians have the same problem. Imagine there's all these dominoes falling over in front of us, right? Like we're sitting here, and then there's like tick, 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 and these dominoes fall over, and we start walking backwards. And the dominoes in here got knocked over by the dominoes over there. And then we follow those dominoes up the stairs. Oh, it was the dominoes on the stair that knocked these dominoes over. And then you walk out the front door and down the road to the middle school, and there's still dominoes. And then that's a problem for both of us, in a sense, that like, what's the first thing? Where did it come from? You know, and we don't have the ability to completely understand that. Although the Big Bang has given us some reason to believe we figured out the first domino. Okay? And so the theist, and if you're a Christian, you're a theist because you believe in God. You guys remember that? I swear the theist. There it is. Last time. So for the theist, God is the first thing. Now, I think that's a much more satisfying first cause because it's outside of nature. So when you get outside of nature, you don't have to follow the rules of nature anymore. But if you want to say natural is the first thing, natural has to have a cause. All things that begin to exist have a cause. And so personally, if I just sat in my chair and did philosophy, I personally would find God a much more satisfying first cause because he's the thing outside of the natural. What is the first thing? I think the first thing is God. Okay? He's always existed, and that's how the Bible describes him. Without beginning of days or end of life, the beginning and end, the Alpha, first letter of the alphabet, the Omega, okay? The one who was, the one who is to come. This is a very Christian idea. And there was a guy before Jesus who was, back the Jews were already around. His name was Aristotle. And he called this idea the unmoved mover. You've got to have a first cause. And for him, the first cause, Aristotle was a philosopher, for him the first cause needed to be something outside of nature. And so he kind of, through philosophy, came to the same conclusion that Christians and Jews have always believed. And so you have the Kalam, which in my opinion is a very good argument for the existence of God. Because of the Big Bang. So the Big Bang makes premise number 2 a reality. Okay, so let's get into the Big Bang now. There was, before the Big Bang, so how many of you guys, let me give me a thumb here. Go ahead and put your thumb up. Okay, here's neutral. Everybody go neutral. Okay. When you hear the phrase, the Big Bang, does it make you feel neutral? Slightly negative, really negative, slightly positive, really positive? Like, where does the Big Bang put your mind? And I don't know if you guys are noticing the front row, every thumb is down, most thumbs are down or neutral. Got a couple of thumbs ups, but pretty much everybody has a thumb down. What's your name? Kylie, it is okay to have a thumb up. Because for me, when I hear the phrase the Big Bang, it's a total thumb up for me. Yeah, Joanne?
Well, I'm confused about it. Is it because, we think it's negative, or, does it make us feel negative?
Does it make you feel negative, or do you think it's negative? Either one. So here's what I've noticed, and I've always been surprised by this. As a science teacher, when there's a Christian kid in class, and you hear the phrase the Big Bang, the Christian kid in class normally is kind of like, oh, the Big Bang, that's the worst. And I'm always like, Christian kid, don't you know what the Big Bang means for you? So I'm going to go through it with you, okay? And then I'll tell you why Christian kids tend to think negative of the Big Bang, okay? So, before Einstein, you guys know Albert Einstein? Most of you just know he's that guy with the weird hair and he sticks his tongue out in a picture, right? So Albert Einstein was a Jew who was not a theist. He was a Jew by race, but by religion he was agnostic. And he was really smart. He was actually kind of a failure. Went to college, didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, and I think he lived in Germany for all of that. And then he worked at the mail. What do you call that place? The post office. He worked at the mail. He worked at the mail. I don't remember what he did, but he worked at some office and he looked out of the window all day and he thought about math because he was a nerd. but he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. And he started thinking really deep thoughts about the universe. And he, in a very short amount of time, came up with some really radical ideas that formed this thing called relativity that became very popular. And then he bailed out of Germany because he was a Jew and Hitler was taking over, right? So what year would that be?
Long ago.
1940s. And I think he was already famous by the time he was bailing out. And he came and he helped what's called the Manhattan Project. Anybody know what that was for? Anybody? Manhattan Project?
I heard of it.
I bet Pastor Rory, the history buff, knows.
The atomic bomb.
They came up with the atomic bomb. And so he, with his relativity and what he understood about physics, he was able to say, hey, let's take all these radioactive things and make a bomb out of them. And it'll blow up a lot of people. And it's better that America did it than Hitler. So it's a really good thing that it wasn't Hitler that got that. Anyways, in Einstein's day, the prevailing idea, because this is 100 years past Darwin, and everybody in the scientific community was like, get that religion out of my science class at that point. I told you guys last week, before Darwin, before about 1850, Christians were the scientists. But then Darwin comes on the scene, and the climate in general of science in the 1850s to the 1950s, it went so secular and atheist really fast. And so, back in Einstein's day, we're in this new era of atheist science, and Einstein believed in what's called a static universe. Static. Everybody say static. That was the worst choral recall in the history of teaching. Thank you, Kylie. Kylie, right? Yeah. Kylie was the only one.
Static.
Everybody say static.
Static.
Okay. When you hear the word static, what do you think of?
Electricity.
Electricity, friction. There is static friction. Good job. Are you in physics class right now? No. Static friction, static electricity. What is the word? How about English class? Anybody thinking of English class?
Static.
Static characters?
No, static.
That's a thing.
Motion.
Okay, yeah?
Is static like, I'm probably getting this backwards, but is it like motionless or is it actually motion?
Motionless, basically.
What?
So the word static,
I don't know static.
Electricity.
think about this. Think about this.
I don't know static.
You're sitting there, not being a wire, not being electricity, and you touch this thing and it goes, tap! Where'd that electricity come from? It was just statically clinging to you and it discharged into another object. Okay? You're a character in an English novel. And you're the boring sister.
Yay.
And at the beginning of the movie, you're the boring sister, or in the English novel. At the end of the English novel, you're the boring sister. Did you change?
Yes.
No.
And
You
it-
were static. You did not change. Okay? Or friction. Here's a deep thought. If a wheel, think about this. Here's a wheel. If a wheel is spinning on the ground, when the tread touches the ground, does the tread drag on the ground? I turn you into a wheel. I crumple your body into the shape of a circle. And then I roll you over and your face hits the ground. Does your face drag on the carpet
No.
while I roll you?
No.
No, it just impresses and then comes up and rolls. So that's called static friction. Which is very important when you're driving. You want to maintain static friction on your tires because you have really good traction. Because like your face won't drag on the carpet, right? If I drag your face on the carpet, you now have kinetic friction. Not nearly as good a friction. That's called screeching tires on the ice and the pavement. Okay. So what does the word static mean?
Motionless.
Motionless, not changing. A model of the universe where it is unchanging. So here's a possible universe. It's always existed, it just exists. Okay? This made the most sense for atheists. Because like either the universe has always existed, or God has always existed. It's one or the other, right? Like, okay, what's the first thing? The universe, it just is, or God, he just is. We all have the same problem. We have to choose a beginning. Like it doesn't, there's no way to prove it really, although you can show a lot of evidence, but you have to choose a starting point. I think what makes the most sense in thinking rationally, my first thought is God. Like, I start with God and I go from there. Or the universe. It just is, and then I go from there. That's kind of the option, atheist or theist. So, that was the preferred option back in the day. Listen to this. No, not yet. Okay, so the model of the universe that is not static is called the Big Bang. So if the universe has always existed, it's just there, right? Versus, what if there was a moment in time where the universe popped into existence in a tiny little spot, and then it just kept spreading out from there? Okay? That's called the Big Bang. It's a model of the universe that suggests it began at a single point and continues to expand outward to this day. That is called the singularity. This is a great science word. Oh. It's like you get some weird science, like an Einstein-looking guy in the dark with like black lights, and he goes, the singularity. It's like a sciencey thing, right? So we're gonna practice the singularity right now. Okay? So everybody get up. Okay. Now we're gonna huddle together. Right? Where Russell is. Don't move, Russell. Okay, everybody, go get as close to Russell as you can. Come on, group hug. How come all the boys are most excited to get next to Russell? Okay, come on. Form the singularity.
Hi, Russell.
Okay, now, as soon as we get the singularity in full singularness, get over here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bang. We're going to go big bang.
What?
And we're going to spread. To the pure, all things are pure, homeboy. Okay, and then we're going to spread out like an explosion just happened, but you're going to go in slow motion because I don't want you to get hurt. Okay, ready? Big bang. Start spreading out.
Spread out.
And stop. Okay, snapshot. Notice where we are. Okay, now keep going. In every direction. In every direction, big banging. Keep going, and snapshot. So this is the universe today. Okay? This is the universe today. And if we take a snapshot, we see all this universe spread out. Now, if someone were to walk down the stairs right now and take a picture of this, would they know that, like just a second ago, we were all in the middle? No. But what if they could take a video? Let's keep going. What if they took a video? Okay, and you were all supposed to go the same direction the entire time. What if we took a video and then, okay, so take another snapshot. What if we took a video of it and then the person's like, oh, there's a video of what happened here, and I'm going to hit rewind and see where it all started. Okay, now let's all go back to the singularity. Joanne's so excited to cuddle with Russell. Okay, all right, go ahead, sit down. So another really good way to visualize this, which I totally forgot to do. Another good way to visualize this, what I totally forgot to do. I was going to bring a balloon, and I was busy trying to get this thing done. I fill up a balloon, fill it all up, and then I draw little galaxies all over it. You know, little spiral galaxies and nebula. Right? And then I blow up, and I let all the air blow out, and then I blow it up in front of you. What happens? As I blow it up. What happens to the galaxies relative to each other?
They get thinner, then the balloon pops.
They get thinner, maybe, okay, but what else happens to the distance between them?
They get farther.
Farther and farther and farther apart. So scientists are all about looking at things in the present and then trying to make educated guesses about what's real. Okay? So, if one scientist says, I think the universe is static, it's always existed, everything's constant, and another scientist says, I think the world had a beginning, and everything's spreading out, right? Like, what was the phrase that we read several times in the Old Testament about God creating the universe? Stretching it out, spreading it out, the expanse, right? And so, 100 years ago, scientists had just kind of come up with this whole telescope idea, and they were getting really good at it, like actually 500 years ago. But then they were getting really good at it and building them on top of mountains, and they were like really big telescopes. And there was one guy named Hubble, and there's a big telescope in outer space named about him now. Do you guys know about that?
Hubble
Telescope. Okay, so this guy Hubble got really into this idea of like, what if we could see if the galaxies are moving away, if the galaxies are staying in place, or even if the galaxies are coming together. And so this guy Hubble did a bunch of research around that stuff, and the main thing that allowed him to figure out, when looking through a telescope, that all the galaxies are spreading out is called the redshift. The redshift. And so there's light, and it comes in these different colors. Maybe you've heard of some of them: red, orange, blue. Let's see, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, right? So red is on one side of the spectrum of color, and so it's the same. It's called the Doppler effect. I was gonna do that here again. Okay, so cross Doppler effect off. The answer is Doppler effect. Sorry, I ran out of time today. Doppler effect. Okay. Little boys. Here's what I want you to write. Little L-I-T-T. Little boys playing with cars. Have you ever heard a little boy play with a car? Toy car? What's the sound that he makes? Okay? If you had even a mildly good science teacher so far in life, you should already know this. Okay? Because it's so easy to explain. Usually what I would do, I would literally go outside of my classroom, and then I would just scream and run by my classroom, and then it was like, right? And they were like, what is wrong with you? It's like, I just have this desperate need for you to pay attention. So little boys, they play with cars. If you've ever been on a highway, the cars drive by. So when the car is coming at you, the sound it's making is coming at you, and the sound waves are getting compressed, and they sound like deeper. And then when the car goes away from you, the sound waves are kind of getting stretched out because they're coming at you, but they're also getting pulled away from you. And so it's, and it gets higher. So and it gets less loud, higher pitch as it goes away. Same thing with light. And so Hubble was able to show that the galaxies are making that noise, but it's not sound, it's light. And the light doesn't make noise, it makes colors. And so Roy G. Biv, over here, violet, red over here, if the galaxies were coming at us, what would it be called? It wouldn't be called the red shift, it'd be called the violet shift, right? Because the light would be getting compressed toward us. But instead, the light is getting pulled away while it's getting shot at us, and so it's got this red shift. And they measure the red shift all over the universe, and it's always the same, which means the universe is expanding outward. And this is what scientists in Darwin's day, in Einstein's day said. This is one more modern cosmologist, I think in the 60s or 70s. This is what he had to say. In the 30s, like they were discovering this stuff, and they say, I'm not sure it's true, but they say that the term Big Bang Theory was like people mocking it. They're like, oh yeah, the Big Bang, right? Everything just bang into existence. It was actually like a mocking term that caught on. So this is how the scientists felt. In the 30s, it was controversial, and then let me just tell you. In fact, here's how the scientific community works. You would think scientists are just blind robots following the evidence wherever it leads, right? That's actually not the case. Here's this first quote. Listen to this. Here's how scientists actually operate. Here's a scientist who's an evolutionary biologist, who's an atheist, and he is admitting these things out loud. Listen to what he says. We take the side. I'm going to zoom in. This is so good. I'm going to zoom in really slowly for a dynamic effect. Oh, this is going to be great. Especially how it's all wiggly. That makes it even better. Okay. We take the side of science. And notice his own bias in this. That he thinks science is the only rational pursuit when it's not. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failures to fulfill many of its extravagant promises. There should be a T there. In spite of the scientific community for, I can't remember what I erased. Spite of the scientific community. It's a good word. That's why I erased it, so we can focus on it. In spite of the blank of the scientific community for
The
unsubstantiated
theory?
It's like they love these just so stories. This is a famous quote. Johnny, you're so professional.
Remember one time you walked in my friend's house and I was only one and you said, oh, man. He just stared. Like,
Richard Lowington.
that's the word?
That's his name. Okay, here you go. See, there's a picture of him. It's on the internet. It must be true. Okay. We take the many extravagant promises in spite of the tolerance. That's the word. Tolerance. So here's the funny thing about the scientific community. There are certain things that are just a sin right now in the modern world's scientific community. 500 years ago, you mentioned God, you're just another scientist. Today, you mention God, and you are not allowed to speak anymore. There are certain things that are just off, what's the phrase? Off the table. No, off the
Wall.
Off the table. It's been a long day. Okay. There are certain things that are just not permitted in the scientific community. And one of them is mentioning God. But, like when you go look at the origin of life stuff we're going to talk about later, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke the way they try to say that a cell could form spontaneously. It is a joke. But it's totally allowed in all the science publications because of this next phrase. Because the scientific community loves just so stories because of their prior commitment to materialism. Materialism was that other word for atheism. All there is material, right? So if you're a scientist and you're going to present things that are the best explanation for atheism, even if they're not very good, that's totally okay. But if you bring God into it, even if it makes sense, you are not allowed to speak. Because, he says here, this is their starting point as scientists. And not all of them, but most of them. We cannot allow a divine foot in the door. So what this guy is confessing to is, we are not unbiased. This guy is admitting, which is good, it's refreshing. And that's why an evolutionary biologist would be willing to admit it, because it's kind of like, hey guys, we should stop pretending it's not like this. We are absolutely committed to materialism. Only natural causes are allowed. Don't you dare mention the idea of God in the scientific community. That's the modern scientific community, right? And so Einstein, when he's doing his whole relativity thing, he knows the temperature in the room. He knows that if you mention God in 1930 astronomy, no one's going to put up with that. And so he decides, he actually sees in the numbers of his theory of relativity that there seems to be movement in the universe. The universe actually is either expanding or contracting based on what I'm seeing about relativity, but he makes up a number called the cosmological constant. No reason for it to exist. Cosmological constant.
What's that one on?
It's a long word.
No, but where?
Oh, what? No, not, okay, not bad. We got zoomed in. Okay, cosmological constant. So Einstein makes up the cosmological constant because he knows you are not allowed to talk about God in astronomy in 1930. And if I suggest the universe is changing, that's going to say the universe began to exist. That's going to mean there's a cause to the universe. That's not okay. So he makes up this idea called the cosmological constant. And then later on, the Big Bang Theory gets proved. So Hubble is already kind of finding the evidence for it. And there's actually a story of Einstein comes to this observatory in the mountains of California and sees the evidence for the redshift. And he really starts to change his mind about it. And later on, there's this other thing called the cosmic microwave background radiation. And this was something that was predicted by Hubble. So Hubble says, okay, I'm pretty sure I got this stuff right here. There's a expanding universe. And he's like, and if there is, I can see in all these math equations, there's going to be this stuff called cosmic microwave background radiation. There's just kind of this leftover heat from the beginning of the universe. So later on in the 60s, they find cosmic microwave background radiation that was predicted by Hubble, and this verifies, it's a prediction that was verified, and it puts the nail in the coffin of static theories of the universe. So since the 60s, scientists have just had to go, yeah, yeah, there's definitely an expanding universe, and if you hit rewind, there's a beginning to the universe, and they call that beginning the singularity, and they have no idea why nothing suddenly exploded into everything. No idea why that happened. And they don't have good explanations for it, and they spent more time trying to figure out ways to say, no, maybe it's still constant somehow, but nobody's there anymore. Maybe you've heard of Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking is another one of these guys who doesn't want to let a divine foot in the door, and he died recently, but he spent the last 20, 30 years of his life trying to come up with a multiverse theory or a inflationary cosmology that involves quantum mechanics, which is all this stuff. I don't really understand what it means. But they still haven't gotten there. They can't figure out how to explain the beginning to the universe without God. And so here's what an American astronomer had to say about this in the 70s, I think. And his name is Robert Jastrow. And there's certain scientists, most scientists are just like religious people. They stick with the group. They don't want to say things that offend people. You know, the stereotype that they give to religious people, I'm not saying you're all like that, or all the Christians in the room are like that, because we got all kinds of sinners who've been saved by grace recently, and they're all kinds of interesting. But, you know, the stereotypical religious person who just doesn't question authority, that's totally also most of the scientific community. You know, and it's funny, it's really flippant in our society right now. Because now, the people who used to, when I was in college, people question authority, you know, oh, all those terrible Catholic priests who molested children, you got to question the authority of the people in power above you, you know. And now suddenly, the conservatives are the ones going, don't just believe everything Fauci tells you, you got to question the authority. And all the liberals are like, hey, quit it, put your mask on, what are you doing talking bad about Fauci? It's just, we're all the same. Scientists or Christians, we're all the same, right? Or conservatives or liberals. So here's a guy who also, a couple of these guys, they just like to say, hey guys, let's stop pretending, okay? We sound just like these dogmatic religious people from the 1500s who we hate so much, okay? Back when the church was in power. And he says, this guy's got a ton of really funny quotes about how contradictory scientists are. He says, for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason. So isn't that an interesting thing to say? There's a real confusion in our society about faith and reason, how they go together. And this guy's admitting it. Hey, scientists have faith too. Their faith is completely in human ability to explain everything. That's scientism, right? That's materialism. And so he says, for the scientists, and this is in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, when they're trying to deal with all this Big Bang stuff that implies there's a universe, or the beginning to the universe. And he says, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. You know, scientists are really prideful people who think they're so much better than those dumb religious people. And they call Christianity and religion in general an opiate for the masses, a drug, just to keep dumb people in order. You know, that's how these really arrogant atheists act. And not all professors, not all scientists are that way, but a lot of them are. And he says he scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak, and they're talking about the discovery of the Big Bang. He's about to pull himself over the final rock, and he is greeted by a band of theologians. What's a theologian? You guys are like, I don't know, I can't even spell it. Give me a second, Johnny. What's a theologian?
Someone who theorizes?
Nope. What's theology?
It's theology.
Study of God. Theo. God. So, logi, logic, study of. Theo, God. Is that right? It's theo, God.
Yeah.
What's a theocracy?
A band.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
What else is a theocracy? What's a democracy?
What?
What
the
kind of
Democrats
thing is a
are-
democracy? Form of government. So what's a theocracy? Government where God's the king.
Let's go.
Looking forward to that day, right? Or it might be a government where Christianity or the religion is king, you know, and makes the rule. So theologians would be, I gotta slow down. People who study God. Okay, Rory's a theologian.
Really never knew.
Especially people who go and get a doctorate in like theology. Those are theologians, okay? And so what this guy is saying is we got all these scientists who gave up on the idea of God and thought they could figure everything out through their own reasoning. And they use their their telescopes and they do all their math and they get up to the top to figure out what's really true about the universe, and they discover, oh, the theologians are already up here and they already knew that the universe had a beginning. So unfair. And so the Big Bang has basically made the idea of the Kalam, remember the Kalam? It has made the idea of the Kalam rock solid. You can't really argue that things that begin to exist have a cause. That's just logical, okay? And the third thing isn't even a claim, it's just a combination of the two ideas together. So, if the universe began to exist, it should have a cause. There's got to be a cause to the universe. So, remember what I asked you? Like, what does the Big Bang make you feel? You know, and you're like, I think it's kind of a bad thing, isn't it? It's like a negative. It's like, ding, ding, ding! The Big Bang means that the most atheist scientists in the room have painted themselves into a corner. And they're now stuck. They're in the corner, and they painted the whole thing. How are we getting out of this? There's no way out. You just got to admit it. There must be a God. There must be a cause to the universe. And this guy, William Lane Craig, I was telling you about, he wrote a whole book about this. And one of these things, the being has to be, is timeless. Okay? Timeless, which is how the Bible describes God. One of these things, this being has to be, is powerful. Like, really powerful. Okay? And another thing it has to be is spaceless. It cannot exist in space because space was created by it or him. Timeless, spaceless, powerful, and he's got a whole list of them. And he writes a whole book, and he does a whole PhD dissertation on what you can derive about the Creator using philosophy if this is true, and also defending that this is true. So that is the best argument. If you're, you shouldn't argue with people just to be annoying, and argue. But if you want to have confidence as a Christian that the universe was created by God, you should have extreme confidence, because everything that we've discovered in the last 100 years in astronomy suggests the universe had a cause outside of itself. And that definition is what we Christians call God. Now, you might be wondering, well, Johnny, why do I have this negative feeling about the Big Bang then? There's two reasons. Okay? The one, depending on where you're at on this, is that the age of the universe, the Big Bang is not just the idea that there was a beginning to the universe. It's a whole model of how the universe formed. And sometimes they call it stellar evolution. Ooh, evolution, that's a big damn, right? And so, one of the things that people don't like about the Big Bang is that it puts a date on the universe of 13.7 billion years. And I think it was 15 billion when I was in college, and so this number changes, and it makes you wonder how confident they should really be about it if they can't define it. But I think it's 13.7 right now. But if we Google it, we might get a totally different answer. How old is the universe?
University of Boston.
Okay. Nearly 14 billion years. It was 15 point something when I was in college, so. I mean, we're, give or take a billion. Okay? So this is one reason that Christians are really oh yeah, the Earth's super old, the universe is even older. And the other thing that Christians don't like, which I feel like we should be kind of more agnostic about, I don't know about this. There's nothing that says God had to make the universe right when he made the Earth. Right? So there are different Christians who think different things about this. So I wouldn't get too concerned about age, but it's definitely something to spend some time thinking about. I could do a whole packet on age as well. Age of the Earth, age of the universe. Okay? The bigger problem that most Christians don't like is what's called nucleosynthesis. And nucleosynthesis is what it sounds like. Creation of nucleos. Okay, so the nucleus of an atom, the protons and the neutrons in the middle that you've learned about in science class. What? Okay? The idea behind the Big Bang is also that everything exploded out of nothing. That's the really good part for Christians. Check. I like that part. But then they've got protons forming and protons and neutrons forming right here. Protons and neutrons. And there's about 120 elements. Every element has one more proton than the last element. Anybody know the first element?
Hydrogen.
Hydrogen. What's in the second one?
Helium.
This kid right here. So hydrogen and helium are like, boom, on the scene in the Big Bang. That's a different thing. Say no to big bombs, kids.
What? Huh?
What?
Huh?
Okay. In the Big Bang cosmology, protons and neutrons are forming like 300 million years after the beginning or something. And then they can slam together right away to form helium and hydrogen because they're really light elements. But then the heavier elements are just combinations of those things when stars, like all this mass condenses, and it's like, really? That really happened? I'm pretty skeptical of all this stuff, but I don't know enough about astronomy to really have much of an opinion. But they think, okay, so all these masses of gases that are formed by the big explosion of nothing into everything form these clouds that then condense because of gravity and form stars, which just to me, that all sounds like a fairy tale, I'm going to be honest. But, okay, maybe. Then the gases, they form stars, and then the stars get really hot and they slam the nuclei together really hard, and then you make iron and lead and all the other heavy elements. And so by 10 billion years ago, you've got galaxies, and then by 4.6 billion years, magically the Earth pops into existence out of all this nonsense. And then there's dinosaurs. Oh, it all makes so much sense now. So, there's this really good quote that I love. It's hilarious. You gotta see it. And then turned into dinosaurs. I actually got this picture right here off of Museum of Natural History, I think, and turned into dinosaurs atheism. This is one of my favorites. Let's see if I can find it. Yes, here you go. This, guys, Share this. Share this on all the social media, okay? Okay, atheism. The belief that there was once absolutely nothing, and nothing happened to nothing until the nothing magically exploded for no reason, creating everything everywhere.
Nah.
Then a bunch of exploded everything magically arranged itself for no reason into self-replicating bits, which then turned into dinosaurs. And that's pretty much, I didn't even think I was going to share that today. But that's pretty much what this diagram shows us, isn't it? So that, and I mean, they're not dumb, okay? Like, you gotta respect scientists because they just spend their time nerding out in their offices and writing journal articles to each other and criticizing each other's ideas. Like, they put their time into this stuff, and you gotta really go academically at their level if you're gonna argue with what they have to say. But what's cool is there's lots of awesome Christian men and women who also are that smart and who like to engage in that, but they're basically ostracized and not allowed in, right? And so they form their own little agencies and communities of people who write books and publish articles. So that's a lot of information. That was going to take 15 minutes. I think it might have been 16 minutes. I don't know, or 39 minutes. Okay, that was good though. That was good. That was good. That was good. Hey, how does the Big Bang point to God? There's your question to answer for reflection.